Yes, we are currently in a bull market. Bitcoin is doing very well, and there are big risks ahead of us that could initiate the bear market towards 2026. In this episode, I want to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which has been passed through the House on the 22nd of May last year and is supposed to be approved by the Senate before the 4th of July 2025. I'm going to show you some highlights from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which is, of course, the product of the Trump administration, and it has a strong relation with the tariff wars, the trade war that has been going on now. The outcome of that is also very important to support the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which for at the moment, there is no insurance that this bill will actually pass the Senate because there's a lot of resistance. So let's dive into it. So let's take some of the highlights of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and see what is the expected impact of those implementations. Would it pass the Senate? All right, so let's start from the top and talk about tax policy, tax cuts. That's no surprise. It was also big in his campaign, tax cuts for the people with lower income, but also you can see tax income is also for people with income towards 500K. One of the things that you can take away from this is that also the rich will being further have some benefits from tax reductions. The expected impact is a revenue loss of the United States of $3.7 trillion, which is a lot. And that will increase the federal deficit with $2.4 trillion. And the deficit is already substantially over $30 trillion. It's crazy. There's so much interest that has to be paid to pay the interest on the debt, and how the higher the debt, the more interest that you will pay, and the more strain it will be on the economy, and it will consume a lot of money, a lot of capital, which else could have been, for instance, put into education or medical care or other social securities for native citizens. It's not good. And one of the things that counteract this deficit are the tariffs that Trump introduced. But the tariff notification early April 2025 exploded globally. A trade war initiated, and it resulted in a freeze period of 90 days. And the expiration rate of that freeze period is the 8th of July 2025. It's a very important date because when negotiations do not go the way that the Trump administration will see it, we could see another big drop on the stock exchange, crypto, everything, just like we saw on April, depending on the outcome of how harsh the implementations are going to be, or the increase of tariffs that Trump could initiate. One important fact to note is that currently there is a legal appeal that the way the Trump administration used the tariff implementation globally is not within the mandate. So we will know before the 10th of June, which is pretty soon. It's actually going to be this next Monday is the deadline for the government to respond to it. And then we will know exactly which way it could probably go. So even on the very, very short term, there are a lot of important dates with huge impact on the short-term economic activity and also short-term volatility, for instance, for Bitcoin, crypto market and stock market. There are things about social security, defense and security, environment and energy. Also changes which potentially is not very to the benefit of the United States. And especially the budget and debt is going to be a real big problem. And there are issues, of course, with geopolitical facts also on other countries, continents investing into the United States. There might be different taxes also besides the tariffs, like the digital taxes might be increased. So there is a lot of uncertainty on that area, which could lead to economic uncertainty, higher inflation, and therefore the start of the bear market maybe later in 2025 or early 2026. So what is the implication for Bitcoin in this instance? That's something that you could ask yourself. When the deficit is rising, that means that money has to be printed at some point to also make sure that inflation keeps up and that they can afford to pay all the interest rates. Now, we've seen that when inflation goes up and monetary policy uncertainty goes up, This is also where Bitcoin shines, right? Because Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million. And on the last one of my last videos on this channel, I also explained and showed you the graph of the supply of Bitcoin. We are at 95% in circulation of Bitcoin. And after the year around 2030, which is only 5 years from now, the daily supply that will come into circulation is being reduced further, because in 2028 we will have the 5th halving, and now today there are 450 Bitcoin coming per day, and in 2028 it will be 50% of that, obviously, so it will be 225, and that means in 2032 it's only going to be 113 Bitcoin coming on the market every day. So the dilution on the market from Bitcoin, the inflation from Bitcoin is being reduced by 50% every year. And with that, you will see that there will be a flight of capital towards Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has a neutral stance. It doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter where you hold it. You can always transact in Bitcoin, and it is a digital store of value. So the rising of the US debt and deficit is bullish for Bitcoin on the longer term. On the shorter term, if you take a look at the implications for economic activity and the macroeconomic effect that the one big beautiful bill could possibly have on the rest of the world, including the tariff wars that's still going on. So much uncertainty that on the shorter term, we could also see a big correction coming in the crypto space and for stock markets as well. So Bitcoin on the shorter term could initiate a bear market later in 2025, depending on the outcome for the next couple of months. We will know in the next couple of months. There's a lot of information coming, obviously, in the next 6 weeks already, and then we can see what the implication will be on the bull market. But because the interest rates in the United States are possibly being cut in June or July, they have already been cut over 10 times in Europe. The inflation in Europe is very low, near 2%. The inflation in the United States is also low, 2.3% last month. So this could imply on short term, we could see an explosion for the crypto market. But these aspects from this bill on the shorter term could also have a bearish effect in 2026, before we will see a correction in 2026 and then move towards the next bull market. And there are a lot of opportunities in that region between 2026 and 2030, in my opinion. So you should keep an eye open, at least one. The import on the tariffs and trade tensions, we've seen this. Even though Bitcoin is seen as a neutral, non-sovereign alternative in global capital flow, on shorter term, we can see that when the risk in the economy is rising and uncertainty is rising, you can see that capital is shifting to a more stable currency, for instance, bonds or gold, and not Bitcoin on the short term per se. That's why I'm saying short-term volatility could be to the downside when these things come into play. But longer term, the upside for Bitcoin is enormous. And that's why it's also important that when you take a look at Bitcoin, for the short term, the volatility is usually a little bit intense. We started at $15,000 at the bear market low, and now we are above 100K. And possibly we go to 150K or yeah, that's my estimation as a maximum this cycle. But we have the Bitcoin Act, where the Bitcoin Act states that that the United States can have Bitcoin in strategic reserve, 1 million Bitcoin, 200,000 Bitcoin every year, budget neutral, which is of course, when that bill gets through, you're going to see a run for Bitcoin, but there's only 21 million Bitcoin, right? So that could explode the price of Bitcoin, because it's going to be a big supply shock. But this is a big uncertainty, and in my opinion, at the moment, the odds that it will be implemented, in my opinion, is going to be low. One of the things is the Section 899 of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is tax on foreign investors. I touched this subject a little briefly in this video. But one of the things is that's what I said, more taxes on foreign investors in the United States. But when you do that, there's also repercussions possible, and you accept the risk that people withdraw from the United States. So this is also a bearish sentiment, in my opinion, once this bill gets through. There's a lot of tension, but there's also a lot of potential, especially for Bitcoiners, for the future, in my opinion. And look, whatever happens with this bill, this One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we've seen that with multiple administrations. You have a 4-year term things get implemented and the next administration cancels implementation of policies that have been implemented in the past. This bill is not a fact yet. This bill has not been approved by the Senate. But yes, when it gets through, it will have a large implication on the deficit of the United States, on the pressure globally, economically, and therefore for Bitcoin for the shorter term, I could expect volatility to the downside. But for the longer term, looking towards 2028, somewhere between the second half of 2026, we could see first a big correction before we start the next bull market. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin, in my opinion, with a limited supply of 21 million, the completely decentralized character, there's not one entity in control of Bitcoin. So it's so neutral politically. Bitcoin doesn't need the Bitcoin Act so that the United States will have Bitcoin as strategic reserve of 1 million Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will always remain to be 21 million Bitcoin. So at the end of the day, when our inflation is a fact, we will always live in a world with inflation. We will always live in a world where money gets printed. So these economic activities and uncertainties at the end will drive Bitcoin through higher prices. So my message is that you need to take a look at Bitcoin, take it serious for the future, and also understand the shorter term risk and the longer term possibilities. I started in crypto in the summer of 2020. A lot of things happened, but it takes time. Adoption takes time. Now we have a Bitcoin ETF, which is thriving. The ETF is doing great. We have companies buying Bitcoin on their balance sheet. There is so much Bitcoin being bought, and there's also so much Bitcoin being traded. And looking at the price, Bitcoin is now over 20 days standing above $100,000. But still, looking at all the activity, you could also say, why is it still only $100,000? Why is it not already 150,000 or 175,000? And in my opinion, that's the reason. There's so much activity, but there's also a lot of uncertainty that on the shorter term, the price could really fluctuate heavily to the downside and later to the upside. So the next 6 weeks are going to be crucial for the shorter term outlook for Bitcoin and the crypto space in general, which I will monitor very closely. So if you are new to this channel and you could appreciate the content, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave a thumbs up if you like the content. I will cover more of this subject as the upcoming weeks pass us, and let's see what the implications are going to be. I'm still bullish at the moment, but we need to really watch the market like a hawk in the next 6 weeks, because the next 6 weeks are going to be crucial, in my opinion, to check the outlook for the next 6 months ahead of us. What are the biggest risks, like we just discussed, and what can be the implication for Bitcoin? And what does it mean on the shorter term for your portfolio and for the longer term? Longer term, super bullish on Bitcoin. Shorter term, we could see possibly a big correction coming up when things go sideways. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you a very pleasant day and see you in the next one.